thank you for watching this narrative of the Animatic. This is a virtual storyboard which we created for the feature film Memory. It was originally inspired by previsions that Pixar Corporation does for their cartoons prior to rendering animation. I found it to be a wonderfully useful filmmaking tool. You may be watching this without any sound, and that is because some of the original files were corrupted. And due to that, you will be watching it possibly without sound, dialogue, and music. The original version did have all those things. We Foleyed about 2,000 sounds, 3,000 sounds, and had actors and had music. If you are watching it that way, then I will be walking you through just with my narrative. But I'd like you to understand this is not certainly the true form of the animatic. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy watching this. Begins with a quote that I feel very personally about. Alfred Hitchcock, discussing the importance of planning shots. And what you're going to see here is really sort of, in my mind, the perfect version of the film. Less a lot of problems and little things that you have to give up, and some sort of destructive collaborative elements involved in sort of low-budget filmmaking. So I guess in a perfect world, this would be sort of the movie. But a few things about this narrative. It predated the final revisions of the script, so the actual story runs a bit longer. But it opens exactly as it does in the film, which is a man running through the jungle. And what we really wanted here was sort of a pinhole in the night, just this light going through the jungle and this sort of forward momentum. We lost a lot of these shots during filming because actually this was the first night of shooting, and the grip truck got caught in the mud at a national park, which we could not come back and shoot at. And unfortunately, we lost about 3/4 of that shooting day and had to consolidate a lot of these shots. I really wanted to make eyes a central motif, and to a great extent in the film they are, but I wanted to start with Taylor's eyes, and then the medical journal he's reading, and the toothbrush, which is the sound of the vibrations when you first see the eyes. And I thought this would be a great shot to show him in a very personal environment, and particularly dropping the toothbrush in the toilet, which he does in the next scene, which is sort of a deprecating act that I thought would really drive sympathy with the protagonist. We had to lose this entire sequence also because of the water tank that we were using was so problematic that we just did not have enough time to shoot. This next scene, again, trying to visually drive elements of airline tickets, hotel keys, his business card, trying to get you to see some things about him before we even really see him at the convention. And that sequence pretty much stayed. This convention piece, we had a little pre-lap of his speech, and then I wanted this very dramatic pullback shot off of his face into a crowd, and I really wanted to sort of underlight the crowd in the foreground. So although they're there, you're really only looking at Taylor. Again, and then this would be key lit with the banner so that everything else would be rather dark except for some camera flashes from the crowd. Most of this sequence had to be lost also because of time. And this I envisioned sort of faces dark in the foreground there with him at the podium, and then he's walking with deeper. This did remain. A lot of that early setup we had to lose because of timing again. We just did not have enough time. But we kept this very long tracking shot through the crowd with the discussion that they're having between them. And then we're at the bar. I wanted sort of a POV shot of the bar, and as Taylor's turning his head, we realize it's his POV. And I had really envisioned this bar very dimly lit with a lot of red. I don't know why, but a lot of red light, kind of a seedy Brazilian bar. Ultimately, we were fairly limited on locations here also, just based on the fact that we had such little time. It was one of the actual scenes that we shot last in the film. And we had to lose some of this coverage, which I really do miss in the film, these very significant close-up shots. Again, the timing of a hard and fast independent film. And I really wanted to shoot from very down low up at these guys, so you'd actually see the ceiling sort of behind them. I like seeing ceilings in films. You see it a lot in Kubrick and things, Driving Reality. This was an entrance into the hotel, which we fairly kept this piece. This is sort of establishing shot. It's very unclear from the picture, but that's a car, and the car moves away, and you see the hospital. And then a POV through the hospital, very late at night, and sort of wandering into the meeting Dr. Costas, and then going to see the patient. This sequence was pretty much very similar to how it's actually storyboarded. We really got most of this. An excellent actor playing Costas. Then the sort of POV in this film, because it's about someone seeing through someone else's eyes. I wanted to be in Taylor's head as much as possible, looking through his POV. So there's a lot of movement from what I would classify as third-person camera to first-person through his eyes. This I really fought for, was a very tricky shot to get, but this is staring through the MRI at the tumors, which is one of my favorite shots in the film. I think it very seamlessly drives a central point. And most of this was really kept the turn away from the MRI and the patient in the foreground. And then Taylor's going to move over to the backpack, and we were able to preserve most of this. And the pulling this slow dolly in, which I really wanted, so we landed an extreme close-up and then pulling up to his face. And then Taylor giving his diagnosis. So I'd say, for the most part, this is very similar to the way we actually did shoot the film. There's some coverage here that we had to lose, but not much. There was a taxi scene which we had to lose for time and money. It was a transition piece. We did it in the hospital hallway rather than in a taxi. This is, where they're saying they've never seen anything like this. And then the car pulling up to the hotel. This is the water tank sequence, which is obviously taking place in his hotel room. And I had envisioned a sort of voyeuristic shot, which was that previous shot through the doorway, and then just a whole series of shots that I really wanted to do here to build up this water tank. We got some of this, but a lot of this we just had to lose because of time. The tank was so difficult engineering-wise to make that work. And I think to some extent we sort of lost some of this tension and build that I wanted. I also, in a perfect world, envisioned him going into the hotel bedroom, which is where he gets submerged by a tidal wave rather than the bathroom. But due to costs, this just wasn't feasible. And this whole dropping of the roof, we had to lose for time, and it's something that I do miss. I love the idea of driving the roof because he's going to go through the roof at the end of this sequence. The door we've obviously kept, although it's the bathroom door, not the bedroom door. These underground images, ultimately we also had to just shave off a lot of this. We just had very little time to shoot this sequence. There was a series where he's trapped and drowning before he goes through the hole, which we had to lose also. This lake piece pretty much works exactly as we shot it. The figure running through the woods, and he's chasing after him. These transparent arrows, I should say, in the storyboards mean camera movement, and a straight arrow means person moving. This is all pretty much the same as the film. I should say, I drew these storyboards myself, so a lot of the time, just to save time, they are a bit vague, some people say. This coming out of the bathroom we had to lose for time also, because it would have taken place in the water tank. And I wanted a moment there where the door knocks and Taylor almost expects another tidal wave, but it's deeper. This sequence was problematic because of time also at the hotel. We just had to lose some of this coverage. And we had to really turn it into a very wide sort of dolly back one-off shot, which is pretty characteristic in independent film of consolidating lots of things. But I do love going in very tight into someone's face when you really want them to notice dialogue. I had wanted Deeper to walk into the bathroom to see that it wasn't flooded. The problem was that this would have been water tank, and we just did not have time on that set. I wanted sort of a very slow dolly in before I revealed the hands, which is the rash. So a lot of this sequence sort of got chopped out in the realities of just making the film. This was a sequence where Taylor's downstairs and is starting to put things together. And this wasn't really necessary when we got into the final revisions. He could realize that in the hospital. And this was sort of dollying up at a Dutch angle, and Taylor's going into the hospital. Again, his POV through the hospital hallway. He walks in. This scene, and a lot of the sequences in the hospitals and things we had time enough for. And this, we shot this pretty much by the boards. He turns, he sees the janitor. He's played by one of our producers. He's pushing out the trash can. I sort of really want a sequence where we drop the sound, and I had a spinning shot here, and we're in the trash can. And this was a dream sequence, seeing the figure, which was ultimately dropped from the film until we're waking up. The airplane scenes were a bit rushed also because of time. And I really saw this being shot much darker with just a little key light from the overhead lights. He's putting on headphones and we're hearing the music. And then we see what the backpack is. But this was something that in the final revision we sort of rewrote, so we jumped right into the plastic bag piece to keep that sort of forward inertia of the scene. There's a video camera in the original script, which William Terrell has, that we lost. And we introduced the photo, which is introduced later. It was going to be introduced earlier. I saw some elegant sort of flyover shots of Boston, which due to costs, again, we had to lose. And this was just a great scene. This was Taylor and Deeper driving home from the airport. We were going to get out a lot of the facts that Taylor's from a single family and that Deeper has a child, some other details about them. And this was dropped not because of the scene itself, but because of time and scheduling. This scene was placed in a studio, and we had to do a poor man's process where we made it look like they were on the highway, and it just didn't work. And that was really a limitation of the way we had to shoot it. And I missed this scene, actually. I think it's a great scene. It's a wonderful scene, Deeper with his kid there and Taylor all alone. And then Taylor goes home. This we pretty much kept. He comes into his house. He does a few things. I wanted more photos and family photos, but just due to time, budgets, everything, we had to trim everything. Root beer was a key thing. That previous shot was going to be a very dark room with the fridge only lit, so you'd notice the root beer. And then going into his mother's room with the nurse. And this is fairly similar to the boards. I'm also, it's funny, you know, the more we stay to the boards, when you look back, the better the scenes are, I think. They've just been so planned and thought out ahead of time. And I think this scene works very, very well in the film because we had enough time to get what we had planned for, basically. In this take, directorially, I didn't want to reveal the mother until the very end of the scene. But somehow, I think it had to do with some lack of coverage. We had to use her as a cutaway to splice off some previous shots, and these are things you run into editing. But overall, I'm very, very happy with that scene. This montage, I'm really happy with. We basically got this, including this POV shot that my producing partner, Tony Badalucco, did not like, but I really like. And just getting to see this guy in his normal walk of life. And music and montages, I just love using. And I think if you're watching, you know, the movie after seeing this, you'll see that most of these shots are pretty much the same. There's some degree of change perhaps due to perspective and just the way we had to shoot for the locations. But generally, the beats of this montage are the same. This is the lead up to the birthday scene. We used a keypad instead of a brick in the wall with a key. And this is very similar to the boards. And I really wanted a sort of montage here just to get away from the story, but I found in the pacing of the film there was so much happening in this art gallery that we decided to cut it. This was a statue that was going to be hanging from the ceiling that ultimately was too large to really use in the foreground. This piece was really the second day of shooting, which I would not have scheduled again to have such a large set piece with so many extras. In all this, we lost a lot of the coverage on Anne Margaret in the performance here. And, I think the scene works in the film, but I always miss the coverage. I love going in close. This was a great sort of slow dolly into the fish close-up. But in the end, I think the sequence worked. And again, it's so interesting to look at this because this is sort of the movie in a perfect universe without scheduling, budgeting issues, conflicts, problems with actors, just all types of different things. And I should say, I think Anne Margaret and Terry Chen and their characters here just brought so much more life than I even saw in this perfect universe. So sometimes, the collaborative relationship can be good. Sometimes it cannot. In the case of these two actors, it was really great. A lot of this coverage with Deeper and Taylor was lost due to time. They're pointing at this is Hopper's arrival, and I did this on the day I changed this. I wanted Dennis to have a much more dramatic arrival where he walks in sort of towering over the camera full frame. And I think it works actually better than this piece. But the jocularity and sort of the camaraderie between the three of these is the point, and that was really captured. Again, Dennis is so on the money. I think the guy could read the telephone book and make it entertaining. And he really breathed life into this wine scene, which worked wonderfully. Originally, this scene, I wanted sort of 360 pan around of the entire art gallery office because this is obviously the entrance to the lair. And it was going to be laced with little hints and things that you'd see second time around, but this was not possible on the day. Again, we were very rushed at this art gallery. The whole wine being nasty, again, I think it just worked so well with Dennis and Billy. I think did a good job there. And this was sort of the heart-to-heart piece between Taylor and Max, between Dennis Hopper's character and Billy Zane's character. And originally I envisioned shooting it in this sort of wide master. On the day I brought it into sort of close-ups because it was such a long piece. And I was actually going to have them toast to this angel and go into the angel's eyes as a motif. This scene is probably the most disappointing scene of the entire movie for me. This was Taylor originally in the edit after the art gallery. He sees the painting from his vision. He sees the figure, I should say, in the painting. And this was just going to be so long and milked out and over the top. And we couldn't find a location for this that fit in the shooting schedule. And ultimately what we did find was just really, unless you're an independent film, I'd say it was unsuitable. And the time that we had to shoot it was unacceptable. But that's just the hard and the fast of making films on these types of budgets. This was a whole piece that we had an actress named Rekha Sharma, Indian actress, did a fantastic job. But ultimately, we lost a lot of this side theme, which was Taylor investigating William Terrell, who is revealed as the guy down in the Amazon. I shot this. We got it pretty much just like the boards, but we lost this whole piece. And, I really think the reason that we lost this was because that opening sequence was so rushed. We just did not have enough time to gather inertia behind that character being introduced. This was a lab analysis of the powder that he doesn't find anything, and we cut that. It just wasn't necessary to the script. I originally envisioned Taylor leaning back. That's his feet. He falls on the ground, and when he comes up, he's behind the car. We didn't have enough time to get it. On the last day, I said, I should get some shots of Billy shutting and opening his eye. And actually, I think we took 2 or 3 shots and used them as portals into and out of the drug trip. And they actually work even better than what was envisioned here. And that's sort of an example of a happy accident. So this is the second drug trip. This had to be abbreviated for reasons I don't want to get into. I didn't have Billy Zane, no fault of his, I suppose, on the set of these wilderness sequences for all these drug trips. So it made it very challenging. Most of the drug trips that you see had to be shot with photo doubles, just using Billy's face on a few selective shots that were shot later to bring in. So I sort of didn't have him in these drug trips. These pieces, however, were able to get. A lot of this really works. I think this scene works very well. And again, it's one of those scenes that follows the boards. The shaking of the fridge, the unveiling of the fridge, this was the handle of the fridge, a few cutaways. And then he opens it, and the girl pops out. And he falls back, and he's in his office. And that is pretty much exactly as we shot it. This was him washing his face. I lost that scene. There is a theme here that he's always thirsty after the drug trips, and I think we kind of lost that when we had to lose some of these shots. This shot I wanted to use as a portal into his mind, so he scratches out the date and writes March 21st, and that's pretty much the same. This was actually a sequence where he took out the tapes of the Amazon out of the video camera that William Terrell has, and you see these Amazonian Indians. Well, first you see Terrell running through the woods, then you see these Indians spasming and things, and it worked. This scene, per se, worked fabulously. It was really creepy with the Indians. The problem was that initial scene, we had lost so much of the interest in Terrell, I think, because of that scene, that it reverberated through this entire plot line. Running is obviously a sport Taylor does. We cut some of this. I think most of this montage was cut because of the previous one. And we went straight into this whole red ochre bit. In the movie, the way we did it, he discovers a CD in Terrell's backpack and finds all these images. And it allowed us to abbreviate the story, also to cut out the past 2 sequences you've just seen. And I thought the art direction, the images by our production designer, Steve Gagan, and our director, Suki, were really, Suki Parker, were really good for that piece. The more slice of life that we just lost, it just wasn't that necessary. This is actually, in the finished film, this shot predates what you just saw with the internet videos. This was not a function of the editing. It was something that we did in the rewrite, and Anthony and I did. And so this really serves the function of the other sequence with the red ochre. And in essence, it conjoins a lot of the different plot points together. And I think it worked again really well. Before, I had written this script before I began rewriting it with Tony. And I had some of these pieces, but I don't think they were so dead on. I think we did a lot of condensing of text. And that's sort of what you do in that polishing period, honing it down to the absolute minimum that you need. If you see an A or a B, that means his first position sitting, and B in that case would be him standing. They're sort of blocking instructions. And you'll see this. I mean, I will envision every single person, what I want them to look like, and to try and give each person a character, props, wardrobe, the pen in Deeper's pocket. I mean, I try and sort of envision as complete a scene as possible. This was a great piece where they were actually going to see Deeper's son playing at the ball game and losing the ball. And I wish we'd had it, because anytime you have action, I think it just breaks things up. But we just didn't have the money and the time. This was originally envisioned as a very long tracking shot at sunset. We had some significant issues on this day, and I had to shoot this sitting. And usually, if I can keep the camera moving, and I just think it's much more interesting. However, I did compensate in this sequence in the finished film with lots of coverage. So there's lots of different angles that we're jumping around in. Terry on this scene, another example of a really good collaboration, had the idea of wearing an identical baseball cap to his son's cap, which I think did a really great job. It sort of personalized him as a dad in this scene. In a way, visually, you see, every time you see him, you see that ball cap. And that's one of those little things, it can be the slightest suggestion can really improve a scene. I think that was a great little piece. The obviously, when you listen to this animatic, a lot of these voices are not the actual voices of the actors. Obviously, we did this before. This is a great drive-by shot with a reflection of the painting over Taylor's window. But I should say, we had Jeff Archibald read for the main character and did a great job. Jesse Newhouse read for Dee Pry, read some things. Jeanette Weinstein read voices. Tony Badalucca. It was sort of an in-house process. This was the initial meeting with Steph Jacobs. I felt like when I went to shoot that so many of these scenes they were always alone. There weren't a lot of people. So we envisioned that rather than after a class, their meeting, that he would meet as the class was emptying out. So we'd have just some extras and some frenetic energy there. And it's interesting that you see, I think, Stephanie teaching students the first time. It's sort of it's a different first impression. This is the coffee house scene, which I envisioned in a booth. I saw it as a different sort of coffee house, kind of that grungy sort of college coffee house, lots of want ads on the walls. And, the hard and fast of independent filmmaking is you get the locations you can get. Next to the location for a studio was a very swanky Belgian restaurant, which we shot in place of this. In two different scenes. I wanted this very slow progression on coverage of going into their faces, and I missed this. This was something, again, on the day I knew I had to lose because I just had so much shooting that to come in on budget and on schedule, I had to tell the story in as a bare minimum there as possible. We lost this street scene also for scheduling, and we condensed this all into one scene in the bar. These dreams, I wish we could have used more. They were very symbolic. I think one of the issues ultimately on the dreams was if you're falling into a drug trip and a dream, it can become confusing to the audience. This is the deeper. I smoked the powder to see if it worked. I saw this as a scene in a very wide shot, slow push in with the powder in the center of that shot. And we would push into this close-up. So this would be the second position of the shot you just saw. But I think that this scene functioned. We changed the opening bridge into the scene, but pretty much the rest is shot exactly as it was. And again, I think that scene works really, really well. We got a lot of this coverage, a lot of the close-ups. We kept it moving and frenetic. And again, I know sometimes these drawings can get a little vague, but when you have to draw 1,700 images in 2 weeks, you don't waste time on insignificant details. I guess in the end, the DP and I am the only ones that really need to see it. But this all pretty much went as planned. I took this out of a parking lot and put it into a hospital hallway, and this is an example where we had a hall It was right near something else we were shooting, and I thought, wow, that's more interesting than a parking lot. So we got some extras, and we created what I thought was a very, very nice sequence. Still a master shot kind of coming in, but they're walking through the hallway. This pineal gland scene really came out fairly exactly as storyboarded, with the exception of a few changes in the production, in the art design that he's seeing in the book. It's fairly the same. I would have liked the images in the book on the pineal to really show the pineal gland's an eye. I guess that can be sort of lost. I mean, we say it, but showing it would have been more interesting. Rene Descartes thought the pineal gland was the sort of where the soul rested. We lost that. I just didn't think that was necessary in the final revision. And then this is the ice skating scene where Taylor walks up. This is pretty much shot exactly as envisioned. He surprises her, and he's trying to entice her into going ice skating. We changed a little of the bridge work. I went for the eye motif in the actual film so that we come out of that pineal gland scene and land on her eyes. But the rest is fairly similar with the exception of the next scene. The ice skating scene, I know Tony feels this way too, is one of the biggest disappointments for me in the film. I really wanted to show some ice skating, some movement, interacting with kids, playing around, and funny that Steph can barely skate, and she's almost ready to bust her ass at any moment. So she's sort of clinging to the railing in this long discussion while Taylor is effortlessly ice skating. This scene was lost because, according to what my people were telling me in production up in Vancouver, they ice skate 24 hours a day. Whether that was the case or they just didn't want to haul us out there, who knows. I still find that hard to believe, but I raised on holy hell, and we never were able to get an ice skating rink. What we got was a condemned ice skating rink, which was a last-minute thing that we thought up from a building that was on the back of the sound stage where we were shooting. And I don't like it. But you deal with what you need to deal with in these films at independent levels. So that's one of the places where we sort of had to give something up. This parting scene at her apartment was condensed into that. And so the rest of this dialogue functions in that scene as it does in the movie again, except it's a sort of condemned building. This was more dream, stylistic dreams, and they were done very stylistically. And again, I think they were lost due to the confusion between the two. That was the little girl crouched in the fridge, and he wakes up. This is the nurse sequence. The nurse is carrying boxes, and Taylor helps her. This is pretty much how it was, except this basement, there was no basement in the house we were at, and we moved the basement to a closet. I had envisioned this exactly as we shot it, the mother with the 3 mountain peaks. We brought in, one of the things we did do in the final piece is we brought flashbacks in to help the audience remember some of these plot points that are visible but might be forgotten because we are throwing so much information at them. And it was funny. I was working with some creative people that didn't like to do flashbacks, which I think is kind of a ridiculous notion, and ultimately we just did them. I test screened this prevision, and we test screened the finished film, and it became very obvious that these flashbacks were needed. And I have no problem with giving someone a flashback of something that they've seen. These were very large aerial shots of him driving, which were lost. I thought up an idea of a GPS navigation system as a counterpoint to the montage. This was him driving up to the sort of area at the woods. Again, I didn't have Billy here for any of this sequence. This was all had to be shot with photo doubles and branches covering faces. And then after that, bringing Billy in for some close-ups. Again, that was actually no fault of Billy's, but I just didn't have him there for that. This all worked very well. Our production designer, we recreated that pipe and hauled it out near the lake to say it was the same pipe from the clearing. I saw him driving and the scuba tanks fell out. We didn't have him for this. So if I had to show a face, it wasn't his face. He's imagining where he is in his dream before he submerges. And I saw this as a very long, murky sequence, which in actuality we had to shoot in the actual water tank that was the bathroom. Again, this was a cost situation. We just couldn't do this. We shot, and then I was still unhappy. We shot a few close-ups in a swimming pool in Los Angeles. The scratch marks were not visible, so we wound up having to use a doll's head, which was an improvisation at the last minute because we had to have the lake scene because we'd already shot other pieces. This was a situation where he's running through the woods and he hears someone looking at him, the previous shot you just saw, and I had to lose that and Para sort of shortened a lot of this because it just didn't have Billy for these scenes, which as a director was very difficult. Didn't have him for that. That was just him dropping the dive camera at the desk. Didn't. This is the run around the reservoir. I got this. I would say that this is fairly much how I envisioned doing it. Deeper's wearing a red New England Patriots sweatshirt, and I wanted red as a theme so that when I was introducing new information as a color design piece, because red is when we're revealing new things, green is the past. In the end of the film, red and green come together, so it's a convergence of past and present, which I think is very true because when Taylor goes in that lair in the end, it really is like he's going into his dreams and now they're manifesting in the real world. This sequence worked very well. Terry Chen, again, I think did a really good job here. He's having to get out a lot of expositional points. That dialogue is very heavily laden with plot-intensive things. To get that out naturally, it's difficult. This I saw as a second piece. We actually shot this near the lake, throwing stones because we were limited on time. We couldn't shoot it out near his house, but it was a change of setting. We had to cut some of this. This was picking up Carol at the gallery. And then I wanted to do this scene of Steph, Carol, and Taylor in the car talking, which I wish I would have had, where you'd see their faces and all these points are clear. This is another place that I was forced into a very long tracking shot at night where they're getting out a lot of this information, and I would have preferred to have done it here. So now this is pulling up to Max's house. The rest of the information from the car is revealed in this shot, but basically everything you just saw plus this is all in one scene. And they're walking up to Max's. The dog runs out, and you might not be able to see that, but that little circle down below in the previous shot was a dog. Dog didn't behave very well, so we fired the dog, so Max has no dog. Again, this is Hopper interacting with Steph, and it worked very, very well. Hopper was just, again, a great actor to work with and really prepared. This dinner scene, I wanted a Captain Kirk piece on the wall. His wife dressed as a sort of Star Trek Captain Kirk uniform. Had to lose that for product placement, but we went with an astronaut piece, which I was never that happy with the astronaut picture because I think it could have been better. And then I wanted sort of a dialogue between Taylor and Steph here. Taylor and Carol. And that works well. So Max is sort of, going on with Steph, and then you've got Carol and Taylor sort of sharing familiar looks. And this all worked very well. And then there's a moment here that's very pointed to make it clear that Carol doesn't live in the house, again, that she's not married to Max. The bridge here for the videos, this pretty much is how we envisioned shooting it. I gave a little flicker effect to the home videos. Some of the videos had to be simplified. We had some stunts with kids that just were too difficult. This was the go-kart sequence. Actually, one of the first sequences we shot. My sister plays, actually, a young Dr. Briggs in these sequences. And we found some amazing people that looked just like Dennis Hopper, and a redheaded woman named Terry Ann who looked just like a young Anne Margaret. This was sort of a rack focus, which I then took as a rack focus with Anne Margaret's character. Steph was really the point of this scene, to show Steph, we're Steph, sort of sensing these relationships between these people. And I think that came off very well. I saw this as sort of a long, reverse track shot, which is what we got. This is the walk home after the date. At the time, my DP played with a lot of colors, street signs and different things, to throw just a lot of colors across their face. And again, if you notice, you'll see that red and green are those colors. They're definitely motifs that are used not only in the cinematography but in the production design work. And that's made possible through all this sort of planning of these shots. I saw this as a little bit different. We played it a little differently on the day. The feeding of Barb, and then the darkness, and then the next drug trip. We did a treatment in post. Actually, the drug trip doesn't begin yet in the original Animatic. It starts here, downstairs in the basement. And again, you don't need to go there. Anytime you can shorten something, you shorten it. I did a treatment in post-production to give all these drug trips a little bit of a different look. The root beer plot point had to be lost due to time. Again, we didn't have Billy for a lot of these sequences in the woods. This was a great crane over shot that I saw where we would sort of crane over the fridge, because it's the second time we're revealing it. We had the crane, and again, we didn't have enough time to use it, and I regret that, because I hate coming back to the same place, sort of shooting it twice. But I did change it up, but I really thought the crane had value. The Alison Frost label on the back of the shirt, the shadow falling across it, the rose being extended, all in sort of one shot. We had to sort of separate that out. Using the fish always brings us back to Taylor's house. More on the water, he's always dehydrated. I get into a little more detail in the book. This is a great piece. After he realizes that his dad drinks root beer from the drug trips, he throws the root beer away, but because it wasn't really shot in the drug trips, that was lost. This is the Alison Frost search sequence. Again, this is a place where I think the production designers did a great job. And our product placement guy did a fantastic job getting Google, which I never would have thought. We got so many real things that I think are very important. Originally, I had him going to the library. I started this book 4 years ago, and the difference between then and now is that I don't think an audience would expect someone to have to go to a library anymore for anything. So we changed all this to the house, and that's a situation where culture just changed. But I did envision this scene of going through these old sort of dusty library hallways and finding him pulling out this old newspaper. It had a great creepy feel, but just in modern day, I don't think anyone's going to buy that. You can do all that from your living room now. So a lot of this, which would have been a newsprint montage, is done across these Google search engine screens. And we got the same thing. And this is the revealing shot. It's the same girl. And this is very similar to how we shot it, except, of course, in his living room on his TV. This was a date, which I wish we would have had in sort of an arcade with he and Steph, and I wanted them doing some childlike things. Skeet ball, and he doesn't play it well, and she does, kind of empowering her character. And this was just a fantastic scene, and I should say that our cinematographer did a wonderful job shooting this. It's what we call the supernova scene, and it was ultimately lost in the film for time. But it was a beautiful scene where they're talking about light coming from a star, and Steph is explaining that the light that Taylor's seeing is not the light. He's seeing light that's already, the star's already dead. It's emitting light from millions of years ago. And it was an analogy to what Taylor's seeing. Sort of the light is Alison Frost, this little girl, but she's already dead. And then they both peer over at this family eating. Again, getting the idea they're both adopted. They share this sort of thing, and this would lead Taylor to bring her to see his mother. This piece was also lost. And I wish it hadn't, but there were some different elements, some destructive elements going on also that made some things difficult. This whole scene was lost also, and I wish to some extent we would have had it, but sort of Taylor talking about how smart his mother was, and he's not as smart as her, and sort of revealing himself to Steph. He's also revealing here that he's going to get Alzheimer's. This is a piece that I would like to have kept, but for various reasons could not be kept. And I think it is something that's missing. And I guess it's something you have to read the novel to really get a sense of, which is that this guy really feels like he's terminally dying because his mother's dying. And there's a kiss, which I had to lose also because of some issues. I couldn't have the actors kissing in that scene. This is related to the supernova thing. Taylor's looking up at the stars. Taylor running around the lake, and this is very much like how we shot it. This is the tooth realization. This was a place we actually had to blow up these newspaper images, very, very large, to dolly into them. And this is, again, I think my production design team did a really solid job on this. It came out very, very well. We're using so much text in a movie like this at this budget. It's a lot. We did a lot. This was a gross anatomy lab. We couldn't afford cadavers, so we had to cut the lab. We took this whole scene basically just into Deeper's office. And this is a place where I would say the production limitations help because I don't think we needed this. I think it's fine that there was a cadaver piece where it would have red herring Deeper because we deal with cadavers in the story, but it shortened the film and moved it along faster. So again, I'm very into driving character through environment. So in Deeper's office, you have lots of things about his character, his sports, Boston Red Sox, kids. And one of the things that I often find in movies when they're designing is things are too clean. There's no clutter. There's no sticky notes. There's no little random things. And so I'll even always go back with my prop and production design people, and I'll add just little tchotchke stuff that I just think gives it a much realer look. This sequence worked very well, and this is one of the last scenes we shot, and it's one of my favorite pieces of acting between Terry and Billy. I think they had really gotten to know each other by the end, and Billy threw out some improvisation, and so did Deeper, and I kept both of them, and it heightened the comedy of the scene, which I think was a good stress reliever at this point. This montage, to some extent, is the same. Running, but I made it more about the characters. Instead of, we couldn't find a batting cage, so I had created the idea of the TV remote being a problem. The rash clearing up, we sort of lost as a theme editorially. I like the idea of that paper in the foreground stacked up. He's going to cut down on his paper load, but some of this was cut. This date was envisioned to sort of drive the sexuality between him and Steph. A lot of their relationship has been very childlike. This worked very well. This drawing, which I drew for his stick figure drawing, because she can't skate. And it probably would have worked better if we'd had the ice skating scene. There were different motifs around her room that I wanted to show that we sort of had to lose. just to speed things along. She was talking about going to Italy, and then in a later revision I changed it to Africa, but we show the painting. We don't really go into the detail about the painting other than the fact that she painted it. And this was sort of, in this shot, he starts over there in the background, walks to the right, and then walks up into camera foreground. And he's looking at her bookshelves and trying to reveal character through stuff. But I think a lot of the things we added were funny. The Monopoly scene was funny. I had a French producer friend of mine who's done a bunch of films, and she said, are they ever going to have sex or do anything physical? It's so childlike. So I rewrote this whole Monopoly piece into a strip poker scene, which I think worked really well, except for some other factors outside my control. We don't really have nudity in that scene, and I'm very unhappy with that. Had I known that that was going to be the case, I would never have done a strip poker scene. And I think that the audience does notice it too. And it looks like a choice, and it isn't. It's one of those things that I just couldn't control. But I'm certainly I would say that I'm probably most disappointed with the reveal of the scene, because as a director, you want to build to a reveal, and to build to no reveal it just doesn't work. And I think it does affect the sexual relationship between Billy's character and Trisha's character. I think to some extent it falls a little flat without that. This was the entry into the drug trip. He was going to bang his head and look up, and he was in the bathroom. Instead, we used his hands coming up to his face, which is certainly an image everyone knows every day when you go to wash your face, in this sort of drippy bathroom, which we recreated. We lost this fluorescent light bit, and this was the figure rushing by, and Taylor shocked, and it was, he becomes the figure. So we sort of start here, really, and this is really shot fairly similar to how it is in the finished film. I added myself some dialogue between the father and daughter that he's spying on to really make it clear why they're there, which I think was a problem in this animatic that was not noticed when we viewed the animatic. This montage, I really envisioned as many more shots. I saw this a la Psycho with a Hitchcockian montage, highly speeded up and then slowing down. So this inertia speeds, and then it almost comes to this grinding halt where the leg lingers and it gives a little shake, and then it lingers. And we had to lose some of this. I mean, we got a montage, but, this was, I think Hitchcock took 4 or 5 days to shoot, and we just didn't. We had about 40 minutes to shoot it. This is the carrying of the little girl down the hall into the office closet, which I did in a different way. From there, I actually had her POV with the hand coming out, so it's a wipe. It's a match cut off of darkness to his hand. This is fire. Fires with kids are always really difficult and take it's very time consuming to shoot when you have a child and anything to do with fire. We lost a lot of those shots just because of that. This was Taylor awakening in Steph's apartment. And then this very long dolly shot in where he's in bed, which is funny. At the time of shooting this, and after viewing the animatic, I knew that I would want lots of cutaways and close-ups, because there's so much information given. So there's a few different shots here, but ultimately we didn't have enough time. The other thing, it's funny, Billy, I think on that day, had a green towel around his neck, which when you see it blown up on a movie screen looks fine. When you see it on the DVD, you almost wonder if it's a snake or something. And it's kind of weird how these little images can be deceiving when you're seeing it on a TV. But I lost a lot of these close-ups these different shots, and I knew I wanted again to be even more defined in the shots here and have more shots of their faces, and I just didn't get it on that day. It was one of those days scrambling to meet the end, and had no money to go over. Lost this exterior scene, which was her walking him out of her apartment, which was not necessary. I was trying to drive cinematically the space between them there and really have them sort of far apart. Shoot it with some wide-angle lenses. I lost this also, and I took it basically from this next shot, the writing of the notes, which is exactly how I bridge in. The phone ringing. This is all very, very much the same. It's interesting. When we shot all these different internet searches, everything in his office, we basically block shot, which can be a little nerve-wracking when you're doing it. It means that we would light a certain wall and then shoot everything off that angle and maybe dress him out of 4 different costumes. So Billy had to act maybe 4 scenes in one setup and then change setup and do all 4 again. So highly discontinuous. This was going back to the library, the same library. Again, time had changed noticeably as we entered the digital age, and we just lost all this sort of hard copy stuff and brought it all into the realm of him at his keyboard, just searching for it on a search engine. And but the beats here, the information that we're getting out, are basically exactly the same as we did in those scenes, and probably the only addition are the flashbacks. So when I show her face, I flash back. This was the community college, very much how we shot it. The sign to establish where we are. They're going through the changing room. Actually, they're going through a hallway. They go to the pool closed, and abbreviated a little bit of that, but just brought them into the changing room. I skipped the bathroom piece. We just didn't have enough time to shoot that bathroom again. So I bring them right in the changing room, which is the place really of the abduction. And he's looking around. My production designer, we wallpapered the lockers and then stripped the paper. So I think they were different colors, one for 30 years ago and one for now. And then this office closet had to be recreated on a soundstage because there had been fire there. So we built 2 identical ones, one we lit up and one we used for the modern day. The little girl burning was something that I didn't get as cleanly as I would have liked, and that's because of time. Dealing with little girls on fire, again, eats up a lot of time. But generally, with the exception of that, it's basically the same. And this was just them talking outside. I saw very fall leaves and very dead environment. And it's funny, going to Vancouver to cover for Boston, it truly isn't Boston. A lot of those ambient shots we did not keep because one place is not another. There are intrinsic values to these locations. This entire sequence, which is shot pre-planned to shoot in a car, we shot in the Belgian restaurant. The reason is that when you shoot in a car, it's very costly. You need what's called a process trailer, and we couldn't afford it. So we brought that into a previous location. And I also interjected a lot of flashbacks into this scene, which they were absolutely necessary to the story based on the test screenings that we did. And I should say a note of thanks for all those screenings that David Weinstein hosted the screening in Baton Rouge through Jeanette Weinstein, our associate producer. Anthony Badalucco is a producer. His dad did it in Kansas City. My sister did it in New Jersey. We did one in New York, and I hosted one in L.A., and they were hugely important to audience feedback. This is another dream. Again, these dreams were cut, and had I sort of known that they would be cut, I probably would have processed a lot of this really cartoonish style into the drug trips. As it stands, I think some of that style was lost, that metaphorical style. And Taylor waking up, and I don't know if that was good or bad, but just a different tone, really. Losing that. This is Taylor addressing Barb, which is a wonderful scene to drive the character. He's able to talk to the fish and relieve his tension. And for some reasons I don't want to get into, we didn't use this scene. But I do miss this scene. I think it's a great scene. The amazing thing is, the guy can say basically whatever he wants to his own fish, and it's a portal into his mind. And then Taylor clearing off the office desk. So basically, the scene in the movie starts here with the dive camera and the downloading of the dive photos. The dive photos are good. I think they could have been a little clearer. to make sure that we completely understood we were at the lake, but most of the test screening people understood this. This is obviously a huge turning point to the film. The killer is now alive, and it contextually changes everything. Steph's after he discovers that his father is alive, and he goes to Steph's. This was actually a change to the actual script. We just cut this out. It wasn't necessary. This more of him and Barb. This is him checking out missing girls. Basically, in the final revised script, once he realizes his dad's alive, he just jumps right into searching, and I think it works better than here. It was sort of an addition that was not necessary. This is him just researching all the little girls. There's a piece there in Gloria Valdez. If you actually watch the film, Billy says it a different way. I don't know why he didn't want to repeat it in the voiceover. And it's actually a flaw in the film. Even though we told him repeat it, he did not want to repeat it. Don't know why. This was originally envisioned in a crosswalk and shot at a nurse's station. Taylor looking for the coroner's reports. And it was basically the same beats. Again, this dream sequence was lost. Again, this is Allison in the hole. Figure offering the rose. The figure in these storyboards, you'll notice, and in the original script, was sort of just a shadowy face. But obviously, since the killer is really a female, I thought up, well, wouldn't it be interesting if we used a mask for the person, since it goes along with the sort of motif. And so the mask was really one of the last things to happen, strangely enough. It's the arrival of the coroner's reports. And this is pretty much shot as I envisioned, Taylor pacing around, delivering his feelings on what's going on with the girls who've been stolen. The phone ringing. It's funny how things happen with actors. This was a very long scene, the DMT scene. It was a lot of information. I had a lot of shots envisioned, which I had to lose, but I think the actors did a really good job in this scene, bouncing around all this information back and forth. And the whole DMT piece. We also had mice here, which I know we talk in the other narrative where I'm sharing the narrative with Tony and Jeanette. The mice really were quite amazing, I've got to say. Much better than the dog. They were first take wonders, those mice. And because the mice were first take wonders, we were able to get a lot of these shots. Had these mice not behaved, this scene would be very different. And I'm so happy that they did behave, because it is one of the most critical scenes in the movie. The only difference, I kind of wanted the mice running through the maze, but on our budget, we weren't going to be able to sink the camera all the way into that maze and follow them around. This was sort of him standing up and watching his POV rise on deeper. A lot of those POV tilt-ups we had to lose. But again, whenever I could, I was trying to plan on being in Taylor's head, viewing. And then obviously, from the last road trip on, we're in the killer's head, viewing the killer's crimes. And these shots worked very well. The MRIs, again, so much production design that was sort of thrown at my production team. And they did a very good job there. Oftentimes, I think people look at these films and they, my cinematographer was great, but a lot of the time, things are attributed to the cinematography that are really the color designs. And there's everything is a choice, and setting up themes is really, to me, what it's about. Um, it's about serving the story. You're certainly not creating a reality. But I was particularly happy with this sequence. It's actually one of my favorite sequences in the movie, and it was probably the thing I was most troubled or saw as the biggest challenge, let's say, before shooting. And Terry hit this line very well at the end, or a father. This originally, again, Taylor's mother has things in a basement. I saw a very dark basement. This had to be moved for production reasons into a closet. And on the day, we were very rushed. I think we had one master shot and then just these cutaways. And it works. But we paraphrased this and sort of made this shot much faster. Steph discovers the torn photo. I wanted a lot of things with the mom that were, again, explanations of her character, which we had to lose for time. And the torn photo, which actually I think came out very well in the final staging. Again, very nice touch from production design in doing that. The shoes. This was a very poignant moment of him with his mother, which was just lost and just shortening the film. The idea was to take this dream sequence, which is what's going on here, and just make it very scattered and chaotic and lots of tracking, so the images were sort of overlaid. Slow-mos and overlays and double exposures and the rose falling at the red feet, which ultimately was lost. Even when we were shooting these sequences, because at time, drug trips like this one had to be significantly paraphrased. Taylor waking up. This is fairly pretty much 1, 2, 3. That means he sits up, he moves, and she gets up. It's sort of the staging information there. But this was pretty much shot exactly as it was boarded. And then Scott Anderson, I handpicked. I knew I wanted Scott to play the father here. I thought he could give a real depth. He's just an absolutely incredible actor. Because really, in this film, the young girl has not been abducted. Everyone thinks she's dead. So this, everything to do with her is really the father. It's about the father's grief. We found an extremely sad house. And this is a case where it was almost like the house popped out of my head. It was so similar to the house. You create these imaginary locations, which I then, in the case of these storyboards, because I used as a selling tool, these weren't even boarded to actual locations. So it was really neat to find a house that was so similar. And this whole picture piece, the sleeping with the photo, it's very poignant. I lost Ricky's room, and the house didn't really have 3 bedrooms upstairs, so the idea was the dad sleeping with the son, who's young, and the girl's room's untouched. The tea party table with the dolls is obviously an allusion to the party later, which you would see in a second screening, and I think there's a lot of neat little details you'll notice in the screenings. He's going through all her things. He finds her shirt. If you look at the monitor there in the actual film, you'll see it's all tchotchked up with kid stuff, which I did on that day. And that's something that I do think that people don't think enough about in films, giving it that real little touch. I mean, you look at your own environment and you'll see it's not clean and sleek generally. It's real. This whole internet piece pretty much was as it was envisioned. And Scott here. And the drawing sort of looked like Scott because I knew I was going to use Scott even back this far. The whole cell phone piece, pretty much the same. And the running and this action I think is very important to the body of the film. I always like to have as much action as I can. This was the snowball scene. For production reasons, we just couldn't do this scene. It doesn't snow in Vancouver, so the cost of creating artificial snow and all this other, well, you can imagine. It was a great scene. It was a way to introduce Ricky. When we lost the snowball scene, what I did is when the dad comes out of the house, he's walking Ricky to school. So I got the beat of introducing Ricky. It wasn't this personal where Taylor really gets to meet Ricky. I mean, the idea of this scene, they're selling snowballs, which is kind of ridiculous, sort of ripping off people. But Ricky gives him the snowball, and there's this sort of bonding moment. He throws the snowball at a car, and when he turns, he's in this drug trip again. So this was changed script wise. Again, chasing after the figure, and then coming to the turning not at the pipe, but coming to the shack in the woods. And this was a place I was very happy with what our production designers found as this shack. It definitely was exactly what I was looking for mood wise. And I'm really, really happy with the way we shot this. This whole dark, the idea that the background in these scenes are black, that's what all that shading means. The only light is this sort of lamp, and then walking over to this barber chair and spinning the chair around. I only had this girl for about 4 hours because of union laws and all these things, and I couldn't reshoot in this location. To make a long story short, I had to shoot her out of every scene and get her off the set, and then reconstruct every shot in 4 scenes that didn't have her. This was an amazingly difficult period. This is, I think Tony was outside walking around. He was so unhappy, and it was so nuts. I would just, say, all right, go into her eyes. All right, pull back 3 meters, shoot a mid shot, swivel around. And I was literally just riding these shots, reconstructing it. This was a fantastic bridge shot. I love it. Just coming off of this blurry water onto the IV. It's interesting because in film, I think you get a lot of different people who have specialized jobs, and they don't see the big picture. It's really the director's job to see that, and people would always say, well, that's so time-consuming, that bridge to the IV. But that's what filmmaking is about. It's not just telling a story. It's immersing oneself in a story. And it's about style. And so I was very happy with that. This scene was at the hospital, and we used this sort of insane asylum for a number of hospital medical scenes. And it's as a trend, we just have more time on those locations. I would say they were scheduled very well, whereas Woods and some of the other places, honestly, there was some scheduling that was just inadequate. It was not enough. And as a first-time director, it's interesting because I did not have a sense of scheduling the same way I do now. I have an innate sort of sense of how long things will take now from a feature standpoint. But this functioned very well because we quite honestly had the time to get most of these shots. And it was an explosive moment between Billy and Taylor where Billy's really biting at Terry's character deeper. I lost this. Again, we had no process trailer, so all these moving conversation shots in cars had to be lost. And this is someplace where if I had a little bit bigger budget, I really would have used the process trailer. I think characters in any moving environment is always very interesting and frenetic and real. As it stood, we did all this in a driveway of Taylor's house. And I love the scuba tanks in the back scene. I mean, always driving these little points of character. So what you just saw basically takes place here in this walk up to the open door. And this is very similar. You see the candlestick and walking up to the fridge. And again, I boarded this without these locations, so we were lucky. We found some locations that really matched the boards. This I envisioned that the pitcher falls. We follow the pitcher, and then they all kneel down. First Steph, then Taylor, then Carol in the middle, and they're wiping up the floor. And I wanted Carol and Steph to talk. This is the cleaning. And then I really wanted you to see Carol lifting that bag with the papers and the laptop because she's just stolen Taylor's papers. And again, this is something you'll notice perhaps in a second viewing that becomes quite clear in this interchange of, oh, where's your gallery? Because she's basically going to go abduct her shortly because she's figured out that Stephanie is Allison Frost. This outside scene was going to be at Carol's car. And we had an issue with the car and shooting on the street. There were a lot of noise issues here. So we took this directly outside the house, and this is, a place where location really is affecting how you're doing things. You have you have good things happening, you have bad things happening, as you're trying to sort of import this perfect sort of vision of a film into reality. But in the case of this scene, I must say, and if you want to go back and you're a real cinephile and want to look, I think Anne Margaret's performance in this piece is absolutely marvelous. And the fact that when you look at it in retrospect after the first viewing, she's talking about herself. And I really wanted that. How interesting to be speaking about something that happened to you, but telling a story that you would never want to admit happened to you. So she's speaking in a very veiled way about herself, and I just think she pulled it off marvelously. And it's something that in the editorial, people really wanted to rush through that scene. I did not, because the performance was so fantastic in that case. This is the whole Lee's Fac search situation, and really, this was a rather complicated series of shots where he would look up Lee's Fac, it wouldn't work, and then he would notice through a series of events that it was backwards, it's calves heel. And the idea for doing the reflection in the fishbowl is really owed to one of our prop masters. She had just a fantastic idea of this reflection, and it worked much better than what I'm not even going to go through the series of events. It was a situation where that was a very happy collaborative accident, and it cut down a lot of shots, which on that day we were very rushed anyway. This is another situation where the information will be revealed at a rare bookstore, but again, in the context of this is a rare bookstore where Tony and I would be playing Xbox Halo, because that's all we did for R&R when we were writing this, unless we were working out or something. It was Xbox, and that we would sort of lead them through this bookstore. This was cut for various reasons, one of which is, again, in the modern age, as this movie progressed into the future, you just don't need to go to these rare bookstores for this stuff, no matter how much you want for the mood. The second is we just couldn't afford a rare bookstore, and all the production design that would be involved in creating all this. So it saved us time and money. And again, these are limitations that you face in independent film. And I suppose that some people are so demanding, that they'd say you never compromise. On the other hand, when you're your own producer and director, you have to police yourself and make those harsh compromises, or else someone else will.